All right. So domain one, we began domain one last time, and domain one is all about standard one. It's worth 34% of your exam. Very, very important. It has all of the standards dealing with us knowing our students, us knowing theory and research practice, best practice to support students to gain learning mastery of those objectives and that continuous assessment of them. So designing instruction and assessment for all students. And today's topic of discussion is competency 2, which is diversity. And that's the all students part of it. That's the big all-encompassing umbrella that is all the diversity. So last time we met, we did competency 1, which is all about human development. You understanding the human growth and development processes, the human growth and development. Remember, our students are little humans and they're not fully formed cognitively, socially, emotionally, maturity wise. And so it's our job to understand where they are at any given age group, grade level, and what things would work best for their instruction and assessment. So you apply your knowledge of the human developmental process to plan instruction, that ongoing consistent assessment, and that you know what ways to motivate the different age groups, be responsive to their developmental needs and their characteristics. So I'm going to flash forward through all of it. It gave us a lot of Piaget, Erickson's, and we looked at some questions. I don't 100% from stages of play and the importance of play. I don't remember if we made it. I believe we finished human growth and development. So let's start diversity. And I want for you guys to mute yourself until we get to the questions portion of the video where we're going to be utilizing and implementing our test taking strategies, critically reading, and identifying keywords and phrases, identifying what the goal is for the teacher in the scenario, reading each answer choice, giving it due diligence, and weighing it against what we identified as important. So we'll do that at the end. Competency 2, all about diversity. The teacher understands student diversity and knows how to plan learning experiences, activities, moments, and designs assessments that are responsive to the differences among students and that promotes all students learning, regardless of their language proficiency, regardless of their ability or disability, regardless of socioeconomic, regardless of age, regardless of gender, all the different ways our students are, regardless of learning preference, that we have provided multiple pathways within each lesson, within each activity, that are going to be a way for the diversity to be successful, for all of the students to have a pathway to success. And so within diversity, you must demonstrate the knowledge of the different ways in which students can be diverse, their personal and social characteristics, their ethnicity, gender, language background, their exceptionality. What can they do? What skills do they bring to the table that makes them different? And you have to understand the significance of the student diversity that you have in the classroom and what it means for the decisions that you make for planning and teaching, the decisions that you make for the learning experiences, and the decisions that you make for the assessments that you provide and that you create. Implications for diversity, what it means for you. Get to know all of your students. You cannot know their exceptionalities if you are not paying attention, if you are not engaged, if you are not a responsive instructor. Getting to know your students, speaking to them so that you can assess their oral language proficiency if they're ELL students, finding out what particular scaffolds are needed and work, and then utilizing those during lessons, during activities, to make sure students with differing needs and differing strengths and weaknesses can master, that everyone can master. Because remember, guys, our expectation always and forever is that all students can achieve. We do not reduce the expectation for our special ed students. Oh, they're special ed, they have an IEP, so they don't have to do the learning. Like, no, the learning objective is the learning objective. We provide different scaffolds, different ladders, steps and ladders, if you will, to boost them to that higher expectation that we have. But the expectation never is lowered for any diverse population. It remains the same for all students. So creating an inclusive classroom by making instructional and management modifications based on your understanding of your students and of their needs. An inclusive classroom means that your students feel included, they feel valuable, and like it's their space. If they are a diverse student, let's say a different ethnic background, and they don't see themselves in the classroom, they don't see themselves in the learning experiences, they don't see themselves, the lives that they had before at all, in any way reflected in their learning, they are not present and not inclusive in the learning environment. It's very easy for us to make it inclusive for just like traditional American students, but we don't always just have that. And we have nuance in our classroom, and we need to make sure, for instance, when I first had Nigerian students, I had always had students that were ELLs, right? And from different ethnic backgrounds, but they were always like Latin-based countries, right? And so my point of reference, my knowledge base was pretty deep. When I received 3 Nigerian students, my knowledge base was 0. And I had to do a lot of extra research. I found one of my new favorite writers is a Nigerian writer. And I took an excerpt from his story, from his novel, to read in class. And it like bolstered and brightened their eyes. And it was a way for me to reflect, to teach my other students about and validate the Nigerian culture with which their peers came from. And so understanding the needs and making sure you're trying to be inclusive and bringing in, and that you're being sensitive to the needs and differences of your students, and that they can see themselves in their learning experience, because it is their learning experience. The little bitty humans that we are helping develop, it's their learning experience with which I hope they look back on like happily and lovingly, and not like my teacher didn't like me and nothing resonated. We don't want that. I have a question. Are students from poor economic background considered it? They absolutely are. It is a diversity. So you could have a diverse, diverse socioeconomics within a classroom, and you would certainly take that into consideration, and there would be implications for it in your planning, the execution of your like activities. For instance, I often had many students with, I typically had a couple of class periods that were at a different socioeconomic, and their parents, they were in pre-AP or AP classes, and then typically the other classes would struggle. And so I had to find ways to, if I wanted to do an activity that needed materials, knowing that my students could not provide it, it's like I must find ways to provide it for them. I would often go to libraries and ask for any like magazines that they were throwing away before COVID. Actually, before H1N, when I used to ask the doctor's offices to give them to us, different like doctor's offices, different offices, like throwaway stuff, but just collect the magazines so that when students are doing projects, they have stuff to cut out of. They don't have to buy fancy things to really illustrate in their activities. But those sort of things you would take into consideration given the population of students that you have. Creating a classroom that promotes positive behavior and enhances student learning. Positive behavior and positive respect, mutual respect of difference, Mutual respect of difference is so very important. We know that our students need to be working in cooperative learning groups that are very diverse, right? With different, it's imperative that a cooperative learning group not just have only native English speakers and then another have only ELL students. That would be beneficial to no one. And the most beneficial scenario would be to sprinkle the ELL students in native English speaking, or possibly with other higher level ELL students, maybe advanced high, and native English speakers, so that, and we need them to work together and to value each other and not, make fun of students that might have an accent when pronouncing things. And so building that classroom environment that helps validate the beauty of diversity. Diversity. You must accept, and it is our job and duty, it is Texas law, that we accept and respect students with diverse backgrounds and needs. There's so many different ways that they can be diverse. Developmental and difference of age is a diversity. Cognitive area, their cognitive development, physically different learning styles. Excuse me. Gender, sexual orientation, language, cultural diversity, exceptionalities, students that are at risk. If you have some students that are at risk in your classroom, that is a pocket, a special population of diverse students that you need to plan and monitor in a different way. Socioeconomic status. So in the cognitive area, intelligence evolves, capacity to comprehend, to think about things abstractly. Students do not all grow and mature and develop in the same way at the same time overnight. Like, they're this age group and automatically they're able to abstract things. So expect students to look different, right? There's different types of intelligences. Not everyone's intelligence looks the same. Students are brilliant in many, multiple, myriad, multifaceted ways. And they surprised me every single time, just over and over again, every single year. All of my students were brilliant in their own amazing way. Gardner identified 8 independent intelligences: linguistic, musical, logical, mathematical, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic, naturalistic, interpersonal, intrapersonal. Okay, so don't have, I don't know why I misspelled that. Do not expect students to have the same interests or abilities and the same ways of learning. Not everyone's learning is the same. So if I only plan one way of instruction for the students, then that means that only the people who benefit most from that one way want to do well, and everyone else is going to struggle, and that's not okay. We have to know, okay, do we have visual learners, we have audio learners, we have tactile learners, and so there needs to be a mixture of activity and stimulation in those areas for students in order for students to achieve. So don't expect them to look the same. Expect them to be different and value their differences. They're a resource. Identify the ways in which they are, gifted, and they all are in some form and fashion, and use their strengths to build on their weaknesses. Spend time and effort looking for that potential and effort. You cannot know what they are good at and how to use their strengths to help their weaknesses if you do not know them and you're not spending time with them, talking to them, sitting down and doing activities. A student that I visited last semester, I loved his idea. He says he only ever does 3 groups of 3 in his groupings, and it's so he can lead, so there's always a chair or a desk available open, and he moves, and he's constantly going to the different groups, sitting down, checking in, sometimes listening, sometimes speaking, just observing, drawing a picture, but engaging in the activity, engaging with the students, always picking up data, learning about his students, spending the time and effort. His zone of proximal development was spot on always. And he actually made his cooperative learning groups to reflect that, to leave that space open for him to pop in. Don't focus on deficits. Never focus on deficits. A student is never going to get better by focusing on what is wrong or what they're weakest at. Really focus on developing potential and finding ways to utilize that potential to increase those areas of weakness. Do not focus. We don't target students from a deficit perspective. We want to target them from a strengths perspective. What are you bringing to the table, and how do we utilize that to access those other skills? Be familiar with past achievements. Again, you have to know your students in order to do this. Be aware of past experiences that have developed the child. Now, this is not always possible, but again, talking to your students, getting to know them, getting to know their family, engaging with their family, you get a better picture of what is happening. If you don't know that, I when I was going through a divorce and my daughters were, my little, and I made sure to tell their teacher what was going on. Like, I knew how important it was for her to have this information, that this like traumatic thing was going on in their home life, and that it might some way affect it, and she never mentioned it to me again, or said that, but I think it's important information, and not everybody feels comfortable to sort of like offer it up. But as an educator myself, I wanted, their teacher to have all the information, anything that you need to know about them that I feel like is helpful to your instruction and care of my children, I'm going to do. Having conversations is sort of like building that partnership with parents is going to be the best way of like being aware of, that what they're experiencing and what they have experienced. Using a variety of ways of grading and evaluating. This speaks to bringing diversity into your assessments. Please do not only give one way of assessing. Unless you are assessing like a particular math skill or a particular something, like find different ways in which to bring in different assessments. Oral language proficiency, have the students sort of explain something to you, or present multimedia, or if you have the artist draw out a graphic of it. Providing a variety of ways in which to assess your students is giving them choices, which motivates them to do really well on the one they particularly chose. Your brain works that way. I chose this one because I'm good at it, and I'm going to go. And it's that internal buy-in. But also they chose one that they felt comfortable with, that they knew that they could shine. Providing a variety of assessment options provides students with multiple pathways to success, because it's providing a multiple, and they get to choose. I know I can make it on this pathway. I can super shine on this way. I'm going to choose it. And they get to utilize their strength in order to show you what they know. Challenge the students. Find ways of challenging the students always. Remember, we keep the expectations very high for everyone, regardless of diversity, regardless of challenge or deficit. The expectation is the same. We will provide, the whatever support or scaffold necessary to achieve that high expectation. Look for something unique students can do. Again, being invested in really analyzing your students. Hold on one moment, guys. Do you guys mind holding on for a second? Developmental differences by age. Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development. We know that's one way that they can be different. And we know that the students don't all progress in the same manner. It's not super fixed. It's not once they turn the age, they're automatically, especially apparent in the middle ages, right? Our 6th grade students, they're at that age where they're almost solidifying that the ability to abstract think. And some of them will still have difficulties in 7th grade and at late 7th grade, but some of them already in 6th grade are ready to go. So although the stages are constant, they're not exact. And you have Erickson's 8 stages of psychosocial development. And those are also in this PowerPoint a little bit above. Then you have Lawrence Kohlberg's 3 levels and 6 stages of moral reasoning, and additional perspectives that we utilize, like different perspectives that we utilize, different diversities. For instance, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's not a diversity in itself. Students at different levels of Maslow are a diversity population, right? If you have different students at different needs, their needs and their readiness for learning are different, and the supports that we need to plan for and implement within the classroom are going to look different. So struggling learners, with your struggling learners, and they could be struggling for many different reasons, right? They could be struggling because they lack the language proficiency, or the content strength, or that particular skill. Many reasons why we have struggling learners. So before instructions, activate and create knowledge, prepare students with advanced organizers. So activating, creating background knowledge, very important, especially for diverse populations. If you have students, like I said, from other countries, from different language, with different language proficiencies, then you are going to want to create background knowledge with the content. You're going to try to connect the background knowledge that you're presenting with the students' prior knowledge, with that diverse population's prior knowledge, right? Preparing them with organizers and graphics to help them organize new information. Help students always, this is an ELL strategy, guys, help students pre-learn vocabulary. It's so necessary for comprehension. If I'm going to read a text with my students, I'm absolutely every single time going to read it before to identify vocabulary words that any of my students, whatever their diversity, would have difficulty with. So if they're English language learners and I thought that the word is not there, if I thought all of my students were going to miss it, for whatever reason, I'm going to identify words that are necessary for comprehension or that would impede comprehension and pre-teach those things. It's part of building the background knowledge. They're pre-learning things they're already going to learn about. And it's important because when we're reading or we're going through a lesson, if we say words or we read words that we're not familiar with, automatically our brain is going to stay on it for a little bit. Even if the teacher goes on with the reading, even if the teacher goes on with the lesson, it's going to stay on that particular word, trying to either decode it, make sense of it. In the meantime, 10 seconds have gone by and I don't know what you said then. And so what pre-teaching academic vocabulary, and really any vocabulary, because sometimes our academic texts do not do a good enough job of identifying vocabulary our students might have difficulty with. They don't know our students. It would be impossible for them to do a good job, every class period, every single year. We have to do that by knowing what our students need and what they would have difficulty with, and then pre-teaching those things before, so as to minimize, barriers in comprehension, minimizing those barriers. During instruction, we will select red flags to identifying markers that we see. If this is going on, it's cause for concern, and being sort of vigilant, monitoring that, identifying when the student is struggling to learn, or it has been, has become destructive. Their struggle to learn has become destructive, or it's now in a frustration mode, because that happens with anything. Cognitively, you have an organ, the brain, and it certain things must be there in order for it to fully function at optimal, capacity. And if you are struggling and something's hard and you continue and you just can't do it, and it's like, I can't do it. I do it to this day. If I'm trying to do something and I can't do it, like in putt-putt, and I can't make it in the hole, and I've already swung like I don't know how many times, I give up. That's it. I'm just done. That's that where it becomes destructive and I no longer want to participate. That happens to our students. It happens when we're learning to read and you're on the wrong reading level, and you're at the frustration level. Cognitively, your brain will not engage in it anymore. They shut down and they're like, thank you, no, bye Felicia, there's no more of this. And then learning cannot take place. We want to make sure that does not happen. We don't want students to get to that point. One way we can not let it happen is by being so amazing at pre-planning, knowing our students, and providing those supports and scaffolds so that it doesn't become a struggling thing. So they don't feel like they're drowning and like they have some sort of flotation device as they're going through the lesson. Red flags should be linked to interventions to help students back on course. So not just identifying like, oh, they're struggling, but have something to steer them, a scaffold, something in particular to boost them back on the right path, or set them on the right path. After instruction, you would provide meaningful remediation for the few students who did not achieve mastery, and you would have to have been responsive the whole time, collecting data as your students are, going through the activity or through the lesson, monitoring them, having some sort of assessment question. And if you'll remember from domain 3, when we went through communication, part of that implementation communication was like very particular questioning so that you can assess them on the fly in a responsive way in order to provide remediation. You can't remediate with which you don't know needs help. And so being sort of artful with your assessments. And remember, assessments do not automatically equate to a quiz or an essay. An assessment could be an observation. An assessment could be a conversation. You sitting down in a group while they're working is an informative assessment. An informal one, albeit, but a very important, integral part in the collection of data. Struggling learners continued. Frequently vary your instructional technique. Again, there's not one type of learner. One way does not fit all. We have to vary our instructional technique. Do different things, try new things, ask the students for their opinion. It's a wonderful way to get that some feedback on whether they enjoyed something. Granted, some of them might be silly if they're like junior high and be kind of rude or whatever, but the most part, you'll get a clear picture of what the students are looking for, and their learning experience should be reflective of their desires, like what they want it to be and what they're interested in. Develop lessons around student interests, their needs, their experience. Again, when you develop lessons around their interests, man, you get that internal motivator already. During COVID, my daughter had difficulty with a particular math concept and word problems, and just turning it into questions about cats made it like easier for some weird reason. And it's like removing a barrier. And now we're not talking about this weird sort of like, oh, Jacob is selling 7 tacos or something like that. Instead, it's about cats, and somehow it's less about math, and we're trying to figure out how many cats. But finding ways in which to include your students' interests and their needs, especially if they're struggling, she was struggling and I took her word problem, rewrote it so that it included things she liked. And then we tried again, and it was much easier for some weird reason. Provide an encouraging and supportive environment. Nobody likes to struggle. Everyone wants to do something and just be like really good at it. I know I do. I'm pretty sure most people feel that way. Struggling isn't a fun venture, but it is a common and unavoidable fact of life. I have struggled at academic things and had to, probably needed instructional support. Everyone does at different times and in different ways. Being encouraging and supportive, using cooperative learning and peer tutors for students who need remediation. This is an invaluable tool. And GT students are amazing, and they often get bored when they're done with their assignment and it was easy peasy lemon squeezy for them. I'm bored. Well, there might be an English language learner or a special ed student who would benefit from being a think, pair, share partner with that student to go over their stuff. And if you can explain it to someone else and help someone else learn it, then you know it on a level that is internalized. So it takes the student who is skilled learning to a higher level and brings the student who is struggling, and students learn so well from each other. Provide study aids, study materials. Don't say, oh, I'm not going to give you guys the questions or I don't know. There's teachers that just for no reason want to make things unnecessarily hard. And like for sixth graders, why? What's in it for you? They're 11 and 12. I don't see the benefit. Provide them study aids, provide them every avenue to be successful. I did it all the time, and I would tell my students, you should not be failing my class. That is not a thing that I will accept at all. It is unacceptable for anyone to fail my class. We will find a way to get you to what you need. And so providing study aids and being creative with your supports based on the diversity and the particular needs of your student for your struggling learners. Teach content in small sequential steps with frequent checks for understanding. This is especially important with our special ed students and our English language learners who do not have mastery of the language, so they might get lost in the language and need to slow it down, break it down into smaller chunks. Our special ed students also need to have the chunks broken down. Use individualized materials and individualized instruction whenever possible. If for struggling learners, individualized materials, like I just said, if I had one struggling fifth grader who was struggling with the math, I would find a way to use her interest to get her to understand, or her experience to get her to understand that. And it might be in an individualized, like nobody else has to do that assignment. And I needed to do that in order for her to get it. If that needs to happen, then that's what I'm going to do. Use audio and visual materials always and every time for your ELLs, for your special eds, for your visual learners, for everyone. I'm sorry, in this section, I did not place visuals, but we just had so much text to go over within this diversity competency. Take steps to develop each student's self-concept. We want them to be proud of themselves. People with low self-esteem, people who are broken, people who are angry, people who are bullied, they do terrible things. We want them to have a healthy self-concept. We want for them to build a healthy sense of self and to identify ways to be proud of themselves with the skills that they have and to build upon other skills. Now more than ever, very important. GT and gifted and talented, same thing. Unchallenged GT, if they are left unchallenged, GT students may develop poor attention and study habits. They're actually one of the largest population in the dropout population of students because they get bored. They're like, I'm done with all this. Like nobody even is like making it. I can't, and nothing even like relates to the outside world. I don't even see how this applies. And they just get a very negative attitude. So form negative attitudes towards school and learning and waste academic learning time. So in order to circumvent that, we need to have hands-on, cross-curricular, creative, project-based, and for sure ways in which for them to see that this have real world applications. That's biggest for them. They have to have the why am I doing this? Their brain wants to know why. Your affective area, this speaks to the building of the concept, focuses on feelings and attitude, your affective area, the emotional growth. Social emotional intelligence is so important. Fortune 500 companies have all agreed that they would prefer their employees to be more brilliant on social emotional intelligence than actual intelligence and not be experts in their field, because they would rather have people who are problem solvers, who can work cooperatively. And okay, guys, let's mute ourselves. So emotional growth is not easy to facilitate, but sometimes the feelings students have about the skills or certain subjects are least as important as the information they learn, how they feel about it, the way they feel about it. And this is like one of the big things for language other than English teachers, a big struggle. Like if the student is in the Spanish class and they're like, well, I don't have to learn it, blah, blah, I don't think it's very difficult to teach. Half of the battle is getting them to buy into the culture and the value of learning another language. That emotional buy-in, the affective skills or social emotional learning take a backseat to cognitive or academic learning. However, they shouldn't. They're very, very, very important. Social emotional learning, very important. Love of learning, confidence in learning, cooperative attitudes are important objectives that teachers should have for all students, and build activities that help students practice these skills. Range of effective characteristics you might find in the classroom: low to high self-esteem, low to high confidence. These are all different ways they can be diverse. Low time management to high time management, low self-direction to high self-direction, low agency, self-agency, I can do things for myself and speak for myself and create action for myself, to high agency. And those are all different types of people, different, and we need to help them develop. We want them to all have high self-esteem, high confidence, high time management skills, high self-direction skills, and high levels of self-agency. Know how to use diversity in the classroom and the community to enrich the students' learning experience. Their experiences should not just be like sort of whitewashed. One, it should be reflective of the makeup in the classroom, the diversity. Remember, just like should be a mirror, and they should see parts of themselves reflected in the learning environment. Knows how to plan and adapt lessons to address students' varied skills, interests, and learning needs, including and so importantly, the needs of English language learners and students with disabilities, which we touched on. Understand cultural and socioeconomic differences, including differential access to technology. Very important. Our students don't all have the same access. Can we figure out a way to make it happen so they all can participate on the same for the same activity? Yes, but we need to take it into consideration. Knows how to plan instruction that is responsive to cultural and socioeconomic differences amongst students. Understands the instructional significance of varied student learning needs and preferences. There are different learning needs and learning preferences. We went over a lot of them a while ago, but their learning needs, they might need preferential seating. They might need, to be, if they're GT, they might get bored. Think, pair, share, and put them next to a partner of someone they're going to have to help, and they'll be useful. Students are resources. All of them are resources for each other, for you. Utilize all of the resources that are there. Understand the significance of the varied learning needs and preferences, and find ways to maximize support of that. Knows the ELPS, your English language proficiency standards, and that's in your Google Drive, for the domains of listening and speaking. And those are the ones that we build on first, right? You're never going to jump to reading and writing first. So we're going to have beginner students, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. And their listening and speaking skills are so important. Oral language proficiency cannot be understated. Your ability to speak clearly thought out message to someone, and then listen, articulate, discourse, be a person of agency for yourself, depends on oral language proficiency. So listening and speaking domains, I have the sort of like the law text, the PDF of the English language proficiency standards. And then I also have that TEA printout that is over the ELPS as well, but it breaks it down with graphics, and really, it's just very user friendly, whereas the actual ELPS are not. All of the graphics are amazing. They give you examples of how you can particularly support activities you can particularly do for the student in the different area of proficiency, beginner, intermediate, and ways to grow in their listening skills, ways to support them and help them grow in listening and speaking. And also, the next one is to support them with their reading and writing in all of the different areas. And it is all hands on deck in Texas for language acquisition, right? For language learning. If you're a PE teacher, if you're a band teacher, if you're a trade teacher, if you're culinary arts, if you're music, dance, it doesn't matter. Everybody, it's all hands on deck, helping you acquire English as a second language. Well, regardless of the level of proficiency that you're at. There's particular research-based best practice strategies, scaffolds, and supports, activities, and supports, resources like sentence frames, right? And for speaking opportunities and written opportunities that we can utilize to help the students as they go through. Because remember, our ELL students have an incredible task. They not only have to learn everything on grade level in the content area, the TEKS, right? They're learning the academic knowledge. They're also actively acquiring a second language, an incredible task that I don't know I could do. But they do it, and they are become amazing writers. My advanced high writers were always my best writers. So a fourth grade, oh, we're back, we're in finally in the questions. A fourth grade teacher develops a series of questions as part of a thematic reading unit on the seasons for a class. Which of the following strategies should the teacher use to effectively apply universal design for learning UDL guidelines while gathering information from students about their prior knowledge on the topic? Now, if you guys remember, and we're going to highlight keywords and phrases, what does UDL refer to? In your coursework, you have an assignment about UDL. So everyone should know what it is. But what is UDL? This little gem here. It's my favorite. I'm saying that's a keyword. What else is a keyword? And then we're gonna have to say what is UDL and what does it mean? It stands for the Universal Design for Learning. So it's a type of lesson plan. And there's guidelines to it. And it's my favorite lesson plan because it does such a good job of, like, I'm pretty mindful about the diversity in my classroom, but UDL, its guidelines are a safety net to make sure you are thinking about the diversity that is in your classroom, making sure that you're bringing in the supports and scaffolds to make sure that it universally your lesson design is good for all. That's what UDL does. Make sure that your lesson design is good for all. So what keywords and phrases? Unmute yourself, guys, and what are some things? What are we looking for here? And what is the question asking us?
I guess while gathering information from students about their prior knowledge.
Prior knowledge. We also have fourth grade. Anytime there's an age group or grade level, I just want us to pay attention. It doesn't always mean it's important, but most of the time it does. So take it into consideration. Fourth grade, early child. It's a series of questions as part of a thematic reading unit on seasons for class. And we want to know which of the following, we're looking for a strategy should we use to effectively apply UDL. And UDL is about diversity. To understand about the prior knowledge, let's take a look at these answer choices. A, projecting the questions accompanied by symbols and pictures and having the students respond by speaking or writing. B, distributing a handout with the questions for students to read independently and answer in writing using a dictionary if needed. C, asking the students to use hand gestures to act out their answers to questions the teacher is asking them. D, having a representative group of students respond verbally to the questions while the other students use gestures to express approval of the sample group's responses. Now, let us not automatically say this is the right answer. Let us, process of elimination ones we can bet ourselves are not the right answer because they're not like addressing the UDL. They would not be the most effective example of UDL in order to generate information, gather information.
Letter B.
B, okay, so why would B be, and you're right, I would bet myself B is not the best. So distributing handouts with questions to students to read independently, answer in writing, use the dictionary if needed. Now, this is fourth grade. Fourth graders are going to read this questions, answer in writing, use the dictionary, and everyone's going to be successful. And the teacher's going to be able to gather prior knowledge in the best way, the most effective way to gather information about what they know. Most of them are going to have difficulty answering the question, so you might not even get the best responses because their writing is not at the level that it should be to see what they know fully. So I would say B. I could bet myself $5 easily that's not the right answer. What else could we eliminate? Because this is not going to be the best. Universal design means it's good for everyone.
How about C?
C, asking the students to use hand gestures to act out the answers to questions the students are asking them. So, I mean, this is going to be difficult for the teacher. It's not the most effective way for a teacher to gather knowledge about the students' prior knowledge, right? And the students are going to be confused. How are they going to be able to express their gestures champions, or they know American Sign Language? But either way, C is not the best answer, and we could bet ourselves $5 about that. What else?
D.
D, having a look, this is what makes D wrong. The representative group is not universal. That's not everybody getting to participate. That's not everybody responding to the questions. And the other ones are just sort of like giving their gestures of approval. We could bet ourselves $5 D is not the right answer. A is the best. A is the best because you're projecting the questions. You have the text accompanied by visuals, symbols, and pictures. So questions, visuals, pictures to help illustrate and sort of better understand, for the students to better comprehend the question, what the question's asking, and it's projected on the board, and having the students respond by speaking or writing, and this allows them the choice. They get to say, do I get to talk about it or shall I write about it? And you will get better, more robust information, a gathering of data in this way, and everyone will do well. You've included visuals, you've given different ways that they can like respond to you in the assessment or the gathering of the information. So A is for sure the best answer. Everyone good with that one?
Yep.
All right. Okay. The following daily instructional objective is posted on the board of a science class. Content objective. Students will interpret data relative to moving objects and produce a motion graph. Which of the following additional pieces of information would the teacher need to post alongside the content objective in order to meet the criteria of sheltered instruction? Okay, so let's go back. What is the question asking us? And I'll give you guys a hint. Sheltered instruction deals with the ELPS, English Language Proficiency Standard. So when we do sheltered instruction is response to. So what is the question asking us? What are we looking for? We have an instructional objective, which is here. And they're asking us for additional pieces of information, which would be reflective of sheltered instruction, which I've already given you a hint, has to do with our ELL population. So let's take a look at these answer choices. A description of the cooperative learning activities students will engage in as part of the content objective. B, a list of vocabulary words that students will learn or review during the lesson. C, a language objective that will be used to focus on developing student vocabulary. D, a description in the lesson plan of how the teacher will modify language to increase student comprehension. Now, let us again utilize process of elimination to get to the correct answer. What can we eliminate and bet ourselves $5? This is not going to be the best way to be in compliance with sheltered instructional practices.
Letter A.
Letter A, a description of the cooperative learning activity has actually nothing to do with the language development, right? Language learning, so that cooperative learning activity, a description doesn't need to be there on the board to engage the students. That doesn't have to be there. We can bet ourselves $5. What else? Additional information. Remember, they're asking us, never forget what the question is. They're asking us, alongside this content objective, this instructional objective, what else should be there? And we already got rid of the description of a cooperative learning. We're not going to write a whole description of a cooperative learning. That's not going to be there. Or we have a list of vocabulary words, a language objective, or a description in the lesson plan of how the teacher, well, and D has to be wrong because this is in the lesson plan and it says post alongside the content objective.
No, I was en nosotros ahorita.
What else?
Ay, sí, pero allá el link le puede dar.
Sorry, guys. What else can we eliminate?
B.
B, the list of vocabulary words. That's not part of the, should we have a list of a word that we might review during? Yes, but it's not going to be posted next alongside the content objective. What must and always be posted alongside is the language objective. Your instructional objective or your academic objective or content, different campuses, different districts call it different things. They're the same. One of those with your language. So instructional objective, language objective, instructional objective, you must have it in order to be in compliance with your ELPS, your English language proficiency standards. Because every day you should be focused on one learning objective and a language objective that you're focused on. And this is how we're going to develop listening and speaking skills. This is how we're going to do, it should be every day, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Your lessons in every class should have an element of listening, speaking, reading, and writing in some form and fashion.
I'm sorry, what was sheltered instruction again?
I'm sorry?
Sí, cuestan 5.
What
I'm
was the
sorry,
question?
what was sheltered instruction again? What did that mean?
Y eso es
Sheltered
40.
instruction guidelines.
Más barato es
Guys, if you're going to be talking off screen, please mute yourselves. Okay. Sheltered instruction guidelines dictate ways in which we support our English language learners. And one of them is for us. So building background knowledge is part of sheltered instruction. We're not just going to start a new lesson, new content, and just like jump into the pool. We're going to show them the pool, talk about the temperature, with the different way, like build the background knowledge before we get in. So different guidelines for you to do to help make sure that your lesson is has provided support for your language learners.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Speaking of ELLs, English language learners in a second grade class are beginning an interdisciplinary unit about plants. To help the ELLs monitor their own learning during the unit, it would be most effective for the teacher to, okay, what is the question asking us, and what keywords and phrases are important that should we highlight?
Second grade. Yes.
Second grade, ELLs. What else?
Interdisciplinary unit.
It's an interdisciplinary unit about plants, and they're beginning it. Whenever they give you a time marker, beginning, middle, end. Remember the slide that we did a while ago, and it was about struggling learners, and it was like before instruction, and then during instruction, and then after instruction. We do different supports, different things, different checks for understanding in the beginning than we do in the middle, than we do at the end. So whenever they tell you in the scenario, in the questions, beginning, middle, and end, please make sure you pay attention to that, because they might give you an amazing answer choice that is a great strategy for something you would do during, not before, or before, not during. And so this is a critical reading test, and careful reading of the words that they're using is so important for your success. So we have beginning, the interdisciplinary unit, and we want to help students, to help the ELLs monitor their own learning. This is the goal. I always want y'all to ask yourself to put the goal in your own words. The goal is for them, ELL students, to monitor their own understanding in this interdisciplinary unit about plants in the second grade, which would be the best way. When they say most effective, most beneficial, most important, please take that as a sign that they might have given you more than one appropriate or effective or beneficial answer choice. One is most based on the specifics that they've given us, based on the keywords and phrases, based on the words used in the scenario and the clues that are there. The devil is in the details, I always say. And so if you're stuck between one answer choice, remind yourself, only one answer can be right. Which one of these responds to the keywords and phrases and addresses the goal in the way, if I could only choose one? And one has to happen before the other. If only one can happen, and go that way as your process of elimination, because undoubtedly you guys will get stuck on a question between two answer choices, because it's fashioned and created, composed to be in that way. So let's take a look. Provide them with a checklist of all activities in the unit and encourage them to mark off each activity as it is completed. B, encourage them to keep all of their unit in a folder and keep a record of each grade or teacher comment on the inside cover. C, help them develop a learning log in which they write what they know about plants and then verify their understanding throughout the unit. D, teach them how to use reference materials about plants and then encourage them to correct their own errors on unit work. Okay. Let's go back to the details before we start eliminating things. What are the details of the specifics of this scenario, the nitty gritty? What age group are we talking about here?
Second grade.
Second grade. Okay, now let's just go. This is one diversity. Remember, we looked at all the ways they could be diverse. They're in second grade. That's one way. Let's take a look at these different things and say to ourselves, which of these is not good for a second grader? Which one of these would you knock off for a second grader because you think this is not going to work for second graders? And ELL second graders? Oh my goodness. Why are you doing this to them? What can we sort of eliminate and say this is not appropriate for a second grader?
D.
D, teach them how to use reference materials about plants and then encourage them to correct their own errors during the unit work. This is going to be the best way to monitor their own learning for second graders? No. To give them a dictionary or some sort of like, I don't know, plant textbook. No, they're barely learning English. This would be so frustrating cognitively for them, and they would shut down and you would have a struggling situation and you wouldn't have success. D's out for sure. What else?
C.
Which one?
C.
B?
C.
C, help them develop a learning log in which they write what they know about plants and then verify understandings throughout the unit. So I don't want to eliminate this one just yet because they can do a learning log in the second grade. And they do need to practice writing. Remember, we want students to monitor their own learning, and this one has them going back to verify understanding. So going back and changing and adding to, and that would be monitoring their own understanding. So I don't want to cross C off completely, but I feel like A we can cross out completely. Don't you think? Would this be a good way for ELL students to monitor their own understanding? Provide them with a checklist of activities in the unit and Encourage them to mark off each activity as it is completed. Would this help them monitor their learning, their understanding? Remember, learning is understanding, not their completion of activity, but their understanding. Monitor their understanding and what they've learned. Would A do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, you're right. You can cross that one out.
This simply measures completion, but it will not help in metacognition and thinking about their thinking and reflecting about their learning. And we need them to reflect and to monitor, actively monitor, go back and reflect on what they previously thought. We're left with B and C. Encourage them to keep all of their work, their unit work, in a folder and keep a record of each grade or teacher comment on the inside cover. Or help them develop a learning log in which they write what they know about plants and then verify their understandings throughout the unit. Remember, this happens at the beginning, so she would help them set them up, and then they would write little by little what they know, and undoubtedly some of it would be wrong and need some correction, but those things would be corrected as they learn and get more comprehension, more deeper understanding, and the unit progresses. B is them simply keeping a portfolio and having a grade or a comment, but it still lacks that monitoring of understanding, that reflection of understanding. Verifying my understanding after I've already written is an excellent way of getting students to think about their thinking and to sort of correct misconceptions and things that were not fully fleshed out or comprehended. Does everyone understand why C is actually the best answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. Okay, which of the following fourth grade social studies activities would be most appropriate for English language learners who are reading and speaking at the intermediate language proficiency level in English? Now, in this particular PowerPoint, guys, I didn't do a deep dive in ELLs. We'll do that. We can do that like on Saturday and do some more questions dealing with ELL. But I do have a video where I go into deep depth for beginner students, what they look like in speaking, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Intermediates, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So I encourage you to go to the channel and just, if you're on your way to work and stuff, or you're on a treadmill, just listen to those different things so that you get it into your, the neurological pathways, and it becomes second nature what beginners need and what they might struggle with, what sort of things, and what's indicative of intermediate students and advanced high, so on and so forth, in the different areas of language: reading, speaking, listening, and writing. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. We have, which of the following is the best activity most appropriate for ELL fourth graders who are reading and speaking at the intermediate language proficiency? So let's take my handy dandy highlighter. A keyword and phrase is this level for sure. What else? What's a key something we need to pay attention to?
Fourth
Fourth
grade.
grade.
Fourth grade for sure. Remember, it's most appropriate, so we might have more than one. What else is really important for us to understand about what the goal in the scenario, what's important for us? What are they asking us? There's still something we have left unsaid. That's very important.
So the social studies activities is focused on that.
Reading and
really so-
speaking.
Thank you so much. Who was that said it?
Omar.
Thank you, Omar. Reading, very important, and speaking. In language, we have reading and writing, listening, speaking, right? These come first: listening, speaking, and then reading and writing. This is particularly asking about reading and speaking, and sometimes students are not careful readers on this critical reading exam, and they think, oh, this is a great one. This is a great answer choice. Beautiful, best practice activity. I love it. It's not even on reading and speaking. It might be about writing and listening. And so it cannot be, no matter how fantastical of a best practice activity it is. the carefulness and the details in the reading are very, very important. So that was a biggie. Thank you. Reading and speaking. Now let's take a look at which one of these. So we need something for fourth graders at the intermediate level that is going to be most appropriate for reading and speaking. Drawing individual family portraits and naming the people in them. Participating in a guided discussion about community helpers and reading a passage about them. Creating a model of a neighborhood out of small cardboard boxes with labels identifying a school, a town hall, and other community buildings. D, making a collage from magazine pictures of various forms of transportation and reading passages about them. Now, let's go back. We're looking for something that is reading and speaking for our intermediate language proficiency students. And they're in the fourth grade, remember. So what can we eliminate? Because we know it's not most appropriate for our goal, for what we need to happen in order to enhance reading and speaking skills.
Letter
A,
A. Mhm.
drawing a family portrait and naming people. Just the naming people is not what I would consider a speaking skill. You're just saying names. You're just naming, not really speaking, not saying a message. And so that's not a good, most appropriate activity. We can bet ourselves $5. There's no reading in that at all. There's no reading. There was drawing, which is not a language skill. So we can bet ourselves $5. A is not it. What else could we eliminate because it doesn't jive with what we need to happen?
C.
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 Letter C.
Because there's no reading, it's just like labeling and creating
C,
like model.
creating the model of the neighborhood out of small cardboard boxes with labels identifying a school. And that's just like creating something like it's cool. That's a cool activity, but it's not what we need to happen. And labeling is not reading or speaking. It's sort of writing, if you will, right? So no, C doesn't do it at all, and it cannot be the right answer. Could bet ourselves $5. What else is not sufficient for
B.
our
D. D is not enough because it only has reading passages. It doesn't have anything about speaking.
right? Making a
So B would be
collage
correct.
is not a language skill, and so the reading is here, yes, but it didn't do it all the way, and so D can't be the right answer. So here they're participating in a guided, and guided is best practice for ELL students. Means you are there guiding it. You've explained things. There's like pictures possibly about community helpers, and then you read a passage about them. This does both
Your
reading
guide
and
discussion is the
speaking.
speaking.
Exactly. Reading, yes, the guided discussion is the speaking, participating in the guided discussion, and this guided is best practice for our ELL students. So B is the correct answer. It is the one that is the only answer that can be correct because it's the only one that does both reading and speaking. All right. An English language arts teacher is preparing guidelines for public speaking for use by students. To avoid potential cultural insensitivity, the teacher should eliminate which of the following guidelines from the list. So we have an English language arts teacher preparing guidelines for public speaking for use by students. To avoid potential cultural insensitivity, what should we remove from the list? The list is below. So we want to avoid cultural insensitivity, and we're doing guidelines for public speaking for use by students. The students are going to use these in order to, achieve our expectation, to achieve mastery of whatever the learning objective is. So what will we eliminate? A, make eye contact with several individuals in the audience. B, avoid reading your notes word for word during the speech. C, practice delivering your speech until you feel confident. D, if you get nervous, slow down a bit and take a full breath. So what guideline would you eliminate from here in order? So let's identify words that are not. Which one of these is for sure not culturally insensitive?
I think D.
D.
D is not an example. You couldn't be, this can't be misconstrued as,
C.
yes. C. What else?
And I would say B.
B. Why would A, or why might A, and it's not just about cultural insensitivity, it's just like insensitive, like you might, let's say you have an autistic student in your classroom. Like I have one of my best friend's child, Francisco, he's brilliant, just like a brilliant boy. He struggles and we all work with, and I love that he can maintain eye contact with me, but he can't do it for long. And my best friend has been in like backyard barbecues upon meeting someone and having a man say, oh, shake my hand and make eye contact with me, and her have to say like, that's something actually we're working on, and so he doesn't have to make eye contact with you. Some students can't make eye contact with you based on their disability. Some students come from a culture where making eye contact with like people of like importance, like the teacher, or they're not just not used to it, and so don't force it on them if not necessary, right? Oh, sorry, I put an X there, but obviously that's the correct answer. For many reasons, that's the correct answer. All right. When showing ballet movements for the first time in class, a teacher breaks down the movements into smaller segments. We talked about this, breaking down into chunks. Which of the following best describes the teacher's reason for using this instructional approach? So when showing ballet movements for the first time in class, what keywords and phrases are important for us to identify here? Let me see your skills if you remember. Remember, we said, are there any temporal markers, time markers here?
First.
Break down.
Yes, first time, breakdown. First time in class is the first time they're seeing it, guys. It's ballet. So you have to imagine that students don't have like the highest skill sets the first time. She's breaking it down, the movements for them into smaller segments. And we want to know what's her rationale. What's her rationale for this approach? What best describes it? To promote learning for all students, to teach ballet vocabulary, to model the elegant style of ballet, to teach emotional expression. What can we eliminate and bet ourselves $5? This is not the reason why she broke down the movements into smaller segments for this first time.
B.
C.
B, to teach vocabulary. They're not doing that at all. That's not there at all. We can bet ourselves $5. C, nothing about that. Breaking it down into smaller segments is not like really, that's no. And
D.
D also
Neither.
is not it. It's not it. To promote learning for all students, because we're at different skill levels. So you can't just go up there and do the movement all fast and fluent, elegant style. You have to break it down into smaller segments. So varying levels of skill and ability can see and do and mimic. So breaking down for your diversity, it's the first time you want to promote it for all students, breaking it down into smaller movements, smaller sections, whether it's a science experiment and you're breaking down the tasks into smaller tasks, more manageable tasks, or breaking down a movement in PE for, a swing or a throw or whatever the movement is, or ballet. Hey guys, I know we're over time, 30 minutes. Y'all want to continue? I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, no, we will continue on Saturday with diversity. I remember I told you diversity is a big one, guys. It's so big and it's multifaceted because like diversity in the way in which we need to think about diversity, it's not just about the students being diverse, bringing in diverse lessons, bringing in diverse activities, bringing in diverse visuals, diverse experiences, diverse assessments and options for the students, taking all of that into consideration and making it happen. Do I have any questions before we go, guys?
I was wondering if like I needed another link for like the one for Saturday.
You will need another link, so just email me tonight and I'll get it to you this evening or tomorrow morning. I'll just send it to you right the link. Or you can sign up on my Calendly. I have my where you can sign up for my schedules for my classes. You can sign up for all the Saturdays and all the Wednesdays, you know, in advance. Or you can just email me and I'll send it to you, one or the other.
All right, okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, guys. It's my pleasure. I appreciate your patience. Teachers are the real MVP. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise. What you do is hard. It's often thankless, but it is the most important job in society. The most important job from which all other jobs come from. All of them. Doctors, lawyers, you know, and we are the safety net of society. So I commend you for choosing this profession and for, you know, spending this hour and a half with me on a Wednesday evening. Y'all enjoy it. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you Saturday morning.
Right. See you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Bye, guys. Have a beautiful evening.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.